So, Brady Quinn, get ready for this to be a sound drop. Are you lubed up yet?
I've been waiting for this opportunity all day long. I
Okay.
really have. I'm not on social media. I think
I know.
if I was on social media, I probably would have
I
tweeted out
know.
something. And who knows? Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have been more reserved and waited till tonight. But let's get into it. I don't want to waste any time.
Okay, yeah, yeah. You love. By the way, nobody loves, bragging that they're not on social media than Brady Quinn. No, I mean nobody does it more than you. Trust me,
You're
man.
wasting time.
All
You're
right.
wasting the 5 minutes I requested for this.
Here's the situation. The Players Tribune published on Sunday a list of demands from Pac-12 athletes, from Pac-12 football players. The demands are ranging everything from safe play during the coronavirus, fighting racial injustice. They want long-term health insurance. They want to protect all sports, not just football. They want 50% revenue split. A lot of this stuff came out. This was all
Right.
in the Players
Yeah,
Tribune.
you're taking too long.
So
Just
Brady
let
Quinn.
me go. Just let me go.
Brady Quinn. Can I at least unwind
no,
it? Can
just
I
stop
unwind
talking.
it first?
No,
All right.
stop talking and let me go. Okay. Here is what bothers me the most about this entire thing is when you start reading through what the hashtag We Are United, the players of the Pac-12, and this article that they wrote within the Players Tribune is, they're going about all these different things. At first, it sounds like they're making this about COVID. And then next thing you know, they're talking about to end racial injustice in college sports and society. So my first thing I'd say to you is, look, we're going to have a vaccination for COVID at some point. And what you're talking about trying to do is lasting change within the college football realm for student athletes. So is it about COVID or is it about racial injustice? Because racial injustice should be something that we're always trying to work on and improve upon. And you don't need the university, by the way, even though I think you'd love to have your university support that and take, progressive measures. You can do that as an individual, okay? So the first thing is, I think when you start talking about the different things that you're trying to accomplish when you do something like this, you have to make sure you're very articulate about what it's about. Because I actually think it's demeaning and takes away from whether it's the Black Lives Matter movement or any other racial injustice movement. It takes away from the message and really trying to get progress if you're throwing the veil of COVID-19 over top of it, okay? So I'll just start by saying that because it feels disingenuous to me when you're like, yeah, it's about COVID, but actually we want all these other things too, okay? So I'll start there by just the way it was presented. The next thing I'll go through is a couple of different line items that they talk about that they're looking for, that they're saying has not been presented to them. For example, they want to allow the option not to play during the pandemic without losing, athletic eligibility or a spot on the team's roster. Well, first off, if you don't play, of course you might lose your spot. Okay, nothing is guaranteed to you. Okay, that's how life works. So of course you may lose your spot. And to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been one university that has said that if a player opts out, we're going to yank their scholarship. I have no idea why they're saying that, where they got that from. It'd be a bad look anyway. But the fact that they're perpetuating out there that this is actually happening in college sports, it's not. It's a lie. The next thing they talk about is the waivers that some teams have asked players to sign. Look, I've gone to places to eat where they've asked you to sign a waiver. It's about liability. And if you have that big of an issue with it, stay at home. Opt out. Don't play. If you're really that concerned that you might come back, and by signing the waiver that you won't have a legal right to come back and sue the university or sue them for any wrongdoing, then don't sign the waiver. You have every right not to. They're still going to maintain your scholarship through that. So again, the first list of things they're literally asking for are already out there for them. And so that's why you start digging through what are they actually asking for. I mean, player-approved health and safety standards enforced by a third party selected players to address. UCLA already talked about doing this. They've already had that conversation. There's plenty of other universities too are consulting with other agencies, other companies to ensure that they do have the cleanest and the best protocols in place for their students and student athletes. Here's the difference with college sports. These, the cost of players in the NFL, it takes away from the revenue owners can make, right? And so if you look at the model of universities, if these players opt out or if they don't play, they don't make anything, right? If the games aren't on TV, they don't make anything. And it hurts them even more so because they do make a good profit margin because the players aren't getting paid as of right now. And so the university is working in unison with the player. You don't think that they want to keep Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, or whatever, Keaton Slovis for USC, whatever star player you have, you don't think it's in their best interest to keep that guy healthy and make sure he doesn't get COVID, or if he does, he's treated the proper way? Like, that's how they make their money. They make it off of free labor. So if that's the case, then it's like, why would you be skeptical of the protocols they're putting in place at this point? I mean, because they're working hand in hand with you to make this money. Then you start looking at some of the other things. Like, they want Larry Scott to make less, for example. He's the Pac-12 commissioner. He gets paid more than any other Pac-12 commissioner, and whether or not you feel like he's done a good job, that's how the free market works, okay? Because the Pac-12 eventually will make a decision if they don't feel like he's worth it, and if they do, they pay him that. Or head coaches, for example. And they talk about, how much head coaches get paid. Here's the deal. Do you not want to pay the Dabo Sweeneys, the Nick Sabans that much? Because if you don't, they're going to go to the NFL. They're going to find some other place to go where they're going to get paid that. So do you not want the best coach, or do you want the best coach? Because that's what it opens up to. And by the way, whatever you're paying Dabo Swinney or Nick Saban, which there's not many, there's 128 FBS schools. Not many of them are making that amount of money, by the way. So let's say you limit how much they make. Well, you're not necessarily going to be able to pay every single player on the team for that. You have 85 scholarships, okay? Do the math on that. That gets spread pretty thin. The last thing I'll bring up is what they're talking about when they start talking about paying players. You're talking about being an employee. That is a long road you have to go down now if you want to start receiving payment for what you're doing out there on the field, right? And this is how that works. It's very similar to the NFL, right? You have to have a union. You have to have someone run the union. You're going to have a legal team. You're going to have lobbyists in D.C. helping to lobby for whatever measures you're trying to improve upon. You have to have post-career player benefits like the NFL. Oh, by the way, they ask about that. They talk about having 6 years after you're done playing to have healthcare benefits. You don't even get that in the NFL. You have to play 5 accredited seasons, which is 2 more seasons than the average career life in the NFL. You have to play 5 accredited seasons, and then you get 5 seasons after you're done playing of healthcare benefits. No professional sports league gets what they're asking for, and yet they want to potentially provide it to every single guy in the field, even some who don't even play. I mean, let's start diving through the particulars of all this, and really, it's an absolute absurdity that they're devaluing the education. Like, they're devaluing the education they want because, A, they don't understand how much it would cost and how much they would have to do in order to unionize, in order to pay players, in order to do the structure they're talking about. And who would be impacted the most? Because they talk about, a lot of the minorities or a lot of the black student athletes. They would be the ones that would be impacted the most. You want to know why? Because you have a thing called Title IX. It's law. For every male scholarship, you have to have a female scholarship at schools. And you're seeing schools cut sports because they don't have the revenue right now to support them. And so if you start paying college football players and basketball because they're really the only revenue generators, guess what? You got to cut all the other sports. They could talk about the endowment funds. Those endowment funds a lot of times are made in donations, not for not for student athletes, not for an athletic fund. They're for other reasons. And so you can't just take the money from a donor or what they've raised or what they've made or accrued and say, well, we're going to apply it to student athletes now. It doesn't work like that. And so you sit there and listen to what they're asking for and you go, yeah, it would actually be most detrimental to minority student athletes because outside of football and basketball, which the majority are, African American, the other student sports you're talking about are going to be gone. They'll be eradicated. Those educations, the scholarship money, it's gone. So if you want to be selfish and you want to try to take advantage of that because you feel like, oh, you're missing out on this, the 1 or 2% of players that are, I mean, like then try to push for that narrative. But outside of name, image, and likeliness, which I'm all for, that's different. You're not talking about making these players employees and paying them a wage. Name, image, and likeliness is then being able to profit off of that. And again, you're only going to see the top 1, maybe 2% of players be able to do that. I'm all for that. That's not what this is about. And that's what bothers me the most is they're devaluing the education. They're not looking at how it's going to impact every other student athlete out there, the other 98% of student athletes that aren't going to actually have the opportunity after they're done to play pro. They're devaluing the education that they're getting. And you know what else they're doing? It's a slap in the face to every single person out there who's got student loan debt, who paid for their education, who struggled for their education, and then afterwards has to go to work and pay it off and doesn't have the ability to play professional sports. If I was a fan, I would look at the Pac-12 and be like, you know what? Why don't you become relevant first? Why don't you actually have a chance of playing in the college football playoff for a national championship? We really haven't seen one of their teams contend since, Washington? And besides the first drive down the field, they threw a touchdown. They got molly-whopped all over the field. So why don't you worry about that first? And then we can figure out how to have more of a powerful voice moving forward and a more unified voice at that matter. So I'm sorry. I know I've gone on way too long, but this just fires me up, man, because they take for granted what they're being given. And they're being given now more than ever. Bigger stipends, unlimited meals, discretionary funds to have their family and everyone fly in for games and so forth. It's unbelievable. And they're talking about downsizing facilities. So we don't have less nice facilities and places where you're spending all your time? It's the most asinine article I've read in a long time.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Hey, I've never heard him that fired up before.
It makes me so mad because I feel like we've gone into a day and age where instead of looking at it and saying, being thankful for what we're being provided, and understanding that these schools provide you a platform and they provide you an education, something you can apply further. And I know a lot of other people might not feel that way, that we're student athletes, but I'll tell you this much. They probably don't have their degree. They're probably not using their degree. And that's the biggest pitfall. And when you look at the stats and you look at everyone out there who goes and gets their degree and has this opportunity, they're able to be more successful later on down the road. And so it upsets me that they don't understand how good they have it right now. And instead they push for something like this. And honestly, if I was one of their coaches and they came to me, I'd be like, look, if you're worried about COVID, opt out. Your scholarship's there for you. We'll try to take care of you during that time and all that. But that's all they can really guarantee them. There's nothing else that you can really provide for them outside of, just saying, if that's why you don't want to come, okay. But we're doing a lot for you right now and for your growth and development as a human being. And you're not valuing that, bottom line.
I mean, look, I knew that you were fired up about this because you reached out. You reached out earlier in the day and said, hey, I need time. I need time to cut loose. And no, it makes a lot of sense. You know what's the best part about all that? They're talking about downsizing facilities. So how's that going to play against social distancing?
Well, forget about COVID, because COVID, once we have a vaccine, right, you're not worrying about that. How are you going to get the top talent? Right? You don't have the top,
paid
coaches, which are the best coaches. How are you going to continue to be good then? Like it's so narrow-minded. I honestly want to see how many players, because I've heard it's only Cal, Stanford, Oregon, and I believe UCLA, I think, is the only schools that I've heard from the Pac-12 that there might be players that are part of this. To me, it is so short-sighted. It is so poorly put together. There are measures that they're asking for that are already there, but they're trying to cry to a lot of people out there who I hope they say, you know what? Yeah, maybe we just won't watch that school or root for that player, because they're just taking everything for granted right now.
Brady Quinn. I cannot stress it enough. That was Brady Quinn, his finest moment here on Fox Sports Radio. Do you feel better? I mean, do you feel like you got it off your chest? Are you?
I do, but the problem is this conversation always keeps moving forward and on and on and on, and it's like, there's not much you can change about how this younger generation thinks and how they look at stuff. A lot of them never had jobs growing up. And by the way, just for people out there who think that, you came from a certain background and so forth, I had to use Pell Grants when I got to school, okay? And obviously you're at a certain socioeconomic status when you can apply for a Pell Grant, right? I had a job when I was at school. I ended up having a double major. I got a degree in finance. My second major was poli-sci in 3.5 years. So at the end of the day, don't try to come at me and act like I don't understand the experience or the difficulties of any of that. I can tell you stories for days and never accepted anything, worked my tail off, and didn't take one thing for granted. And I'm proud of that, and I wish more kids took on that approach instead of this lazy approach they're talking about.